Okay, this is the Photoshop Stretch and Squash tutorial using Photoshop for animation and using the motion workspace. So first you want to open up Photoshop. So click on your Photoshop icon at the bottom in the dock. So you want to make a new file and you want to select a film and video. And the preset we're using is the HDV HDTV 720p document. Now you want to go ahead and you want to change this to say transparent. Then you create that. We want to save this with the name, last name, first initial, and stretch. Make sure you know where it's going. I'm going to put it on the desktop, and I'm going to put it in the folder that I've got all of my straight ahead tutorials in, just so I have them all in the same place. Okay, at the bottom of the screen, this time we're going to create a frame animation. So you want to make sure it says create frame animation at the bottom. Now click on the words frame animation to create a frame animation. Now I'm going to close the library window because I don't need to see that and it's taking up too much room for me. I really need to see the layers. I don't really need to see the histogram right now. You can always change what's showing on your desktop to make sure that it fits with your needs. Now, in my sketchbook, I should have done a production sketch with the needed shapes. So, I want to have these shapes. I wanted to have a round ball for number 1, and then when it lands it's going to squash. That's why it's called stretch and squash. And so we'll have a squash shape for the 5th frame. Then we'll be bouncing it up and hitting the wall, and there will be another squash shape for the 9th frame. And then the 15th frame will be these splash marks, the exploding shapes. So that's the first production sketch that I did. Then I added to that. So now I've got the in-betweens. Between 1 and 5, I chose the middle one, 3, where it's beginning to stretch down to show that the motion is going this direction. It's skinny and stretching out. Then after it bounces, the middle one here between 5 and 9 is 7, and it's going in the direction that the motion is taking place, and it's similarly stretched out, a little bit more stretched because it's going faster here. Okay, and then in the last one, I did the in-betweens of those. So between 1 and 3, the circle is not quite as stretched out as it is in 3, and in 4, it's much more stretched out than it was in 3. Then in 6, it almost goes back to being a circle, going from splayed out until going to stretching forward. So it almost goes back to a circle, then it stretches out further at 7, and as it is about to hit, it sort of slows down because it's just touching, and then 9 is squashed. And then the splash marks, of course, between 9 and 15 we would make the different splashing shapes spreading further apart. So that's our production sketch that helps you plan ahead. So you've got your production sketch and you've numbered those shapes to make sure that you know exactly how many frames you're going to need. Okay, so in Photoshop, making sure we're in the motion, We're going to click on the Layers panel to make it current. We're going to double click on that first layer and we're going to change the name. We're going to call it Bounce 1 because it's the first frame in the bounce animation. Now we're going to draw a ball. So in the layer Bounce 1, we're going to select the Shape tool, the ellipse, and that will be underneath. This is the custom shape, and now I'm going to go through the different shapes. The ellipse will make a circle if I hold down Shift. Now it's going to start drawing from the corner, so I'm going to go over a little bit to make sure that I can make a circle pretty much in the middle, and I'm going to hold down Shift, I'm going to click, and I'm going to drag out a circle. Okay, now this has no stroke, it has a fill. Right now it's black, so I'm going to change the color of the fill to red before it's still selected, and then that's good. Okay, and now I'm going to Command-S to save it. Now I'm going to, with this layer selected, I'm going to press Command-J to duplicate it, and then I'm going to double click on this one and change the name to Bounce 5, because I'm going to go ahead and make the next position where it's down at the bottom and flattened. So now this one's selected, and I'm going to take my Move tool, I'm going to move it down to the bottom. If I hold down Shift, it only moves in one direction. And I'm going to have it go to that blue line, I think. And now I'm going to, with Show Transform controls on, I can go ahead and flatten it and stretch it out. Try not to stretch it too much, but you want to give the impression that it's squashed out from this shape. Okay, that's good. I'm going to click on the check mark to accept the changes, and I'm going to close down the properties box so I have more room to work on my other stuff. That's Command-S. And now I'm going to Command-J, and that's Bounce 5 copy, but I'm going to change the name of this one to Bounce 9 and save that. And now I'm going to move Bounce 9 up in this direction, and it's going to be hitting the wall and squashing. And since it's already flattened out, I think I'll just rotate it. So I'll hold down Shift and rotate until it's nice and rotated in the right direction. Move it about against the wall. We'll say that's the wall. Okay. And accept the changes by clicking on the check mark and Command-S to save that. Okay, now we're going to actually make the next frame, because if we duplicate it, it's going to duplicate the shape and you can't draw on a shape layer. So I'm going to add a new layer using this Add a New Layer button at the bottom, and I'm going to call this one Bounce 15. I'm going to get the paintbrush tool, and I'm going to make sure that my paintbrush is actually hard edge, so hardness 100%, and I want it to be a little bit big so that it can make some nice splashy shapes. And here I'd been doing something where I was using darken, so I have to make sure that my mode is normal. Now in Bounce 15, I'm going to check down here, and my color is not taken the same color as I had, so I'm going to select that. So now I have the same color. Okay, now I'm going to splash it. Okay, so that looks pretty explodey. So now I have just 4 frames. I'm going to use the timeline flyout to make frames from layers. And now you can see here's your frames. I'm going to put in a delay of a half a second since we have so few frames, so 0.5. And I'm going to make it repeat forever. And then I'm going to let it play so I can check my work. It's a very simple idea of motion there. Okay, Command Save. Now go to the last frame. Make sure you're on the last frame here, because now you're going to start doing stuff here, and we're going to have to play with the eyeballs and do all kinds of stuff. But to begin with, if you start with your 4th frame selected, you'll be able to control a little bit more what's happening. So on this frame, I'm going to come back to the Layers palette, and I'm going to select the layer Bounce 1. I'm going to Command J, and I'm going to call this one Bounce 3. Okay, now I'm going to check to see what Bounce 3 looks like in relation to Bounce 1 and Bounce 5. So Bounce 3, I want to get the Move tool, and I want to move it down, so hold down Shift. I'm going to move it down until it's about halfway in its travel, and I'm going to make it a little thinner and a little longer. So that looks good. And now I want to go to the Bounce 5, and I want to duplicate that, Command J. And on this layer, I'm going to turn this one off and this one off. On Bounce 5, I want to have it halfway between Bounce 5 and Bounce 9. I want to have this one in Bounce 7. So halfway between Bounce 5 and Bounce 9, I've got Bounce 7. So I'm going to drag this up, and I'm going to rotate it so it's halfway between there. Make it a little bit fatter and a little shorter. Get a good angle on it. Okay, and that looks good. I'm going to say that's good. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to Bounce 1 and Bounce 3. And I'm going to duplicate Bounce 1 again, so Command J. I'm going to call that one Bounce 2. Now Bounce 2, I want to be slightly beginning to stretch, so just a little bit, not as much as this Bounce 3, but just a little bit, so it looks like it's starting to move. Get it nicely arranged. That looks good. Okay, and now I'm going to come up to Bounce 3 and Bounce 5. I'm going to select Bounce 3. I'm going to duplicate that. And that one is going to be Bounce 4. Now Bounce 4, we want to be just starting to touch the ground. And maybe starting to get back to be round. So I'm going to drag it down so it's like touching the ground, make it look like it's going to be round again. Okay, that looks good. And now we're going to go to Bounce 5 and Bounce 7. I'm going to duplicate Bounce 5 so we can get Bounce 6. And this one's going to be beginning to move up and make itself rounded again. But it's got an angle on it now. That looks good. And now we want to go between bounce 7 and bounce 9. Press Command-J and fill in bounce 8. Now bounce 8 is coming up here, and it's getting to be more of a rounded shape again because it's beginning to hit. Okay, so now you've got everything until you've got between bounce 9 and bounce 15. You can duplicate bounce 9, and for this one, for bounce 10, you can adjust the shape to make it look like it's got some new things growing out of it. So add anchor point tool and add a couple of anchor points so you can start it bending, and then after this you can just draw. So I'm going to get my direct selection tool. You've got your path selection tool, which is black, or your direct selection tool, which is white. The direct selection tool, you can make sure you deselect it, and then you can click on a specific point. And the points you can move independently of each other, so you can make it look like the ball is beginning to actually kind of explode. You can adjust the curve handles. Okay, so now we can accept that. Turn off that. And now between 10 and 15, you're going to put in 4 more empty layers. 1, 2, 3, let's see, 16, 17. No. Okay, bounce 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So now we're going to change these to okay, now bounce 10 is here, bounce 11. We want to have blobs that are moving out and at the same time still have some of the space. So we want to start out by drawing something that is partially in the same area before you turn off the eyeball for bounce 10. And now we can fill in a little bit more and try to make it look believable. Okay, and then there's that. Come to bounce 12. Once again, moving further away from the wall. Now bounce 13. And here we start to say, okay, now I know where these are going, so we can just start them going directly in that direction. Okay, so that's all of them. And now, these are still all right. This one has everything that we had showing in it. What we want to do now is we want to duplicate this frame until we have 15 frames. So we're going to come here and we're going to copy frame, and then we're going to paste frame and paste after selection. Okay. Or we can use this 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, 8. There we go. So now we have 15. And we come back to here. In frame 1, we want bounce 1 showing, and that's it. In frame 2, we want only bounce 2. In frame 3, we want only bounce 3. So what we're doing now is we're matching this number with this number. Okay, so now everything should be the way it should be. I'm going to Command-S, then we're going to play, see how it looks. It's got half a second of delay. So what we're going to do now is we want to change it to 0.1. And then Command Save. And let's see what that looks like. Okay, I think that everything seems to be just a little bit to the left, so I'm going to move tool and just move it just a little bit to the left. There, that looks good. Command Save, go back to the frame at the beginning, and now we're going to Command Save again to make sure it's saved. And now we're going to export, render video, make sure it's going into the correct folder. Yeah, that looks good. And now I'm going to render it. Okay, so that is the stretch and squash tutorial.